Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Brent Aiken, David Pruitt, and Russell Martin. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Russell Martin.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I am Russell Martin, one of your hosts, along with several others. But this week, we just want to continue our practice of bringing you conversations with youth leaders from around the world, mostly in the United States, but to bring you conversations with youth leaders that may help you and inspire you. And so before we get started with today's conversation, I want to encourage you a couple of things. One is all of our podcast episodes. I think we're up to 120 or something along those lines. So multiple podcast episodes of conversations just like this are available on our website, studentministryconversations.org. So please go visit that. There's also some articles and blog posts, and we'll be adding more of those and resources coming up for you. So please make sure and check that out. Also, if you're on social media, then at Talk Student Men, if that is Instagram, Facebook, whatever, go check us out at Talk Student Men. And then also you can look up Student Ministry Conversations on YouTube, and all of these same episodes that are on Spotify or whatever your podcast player are, they're also on our YouTube channel, and it's just the recordings of those as well. So however you would like to view, we thank you for doing that. So I want to dive into our next conversation. So doing something a little different. First of all, we have Courtney Wheeland, and Courtney is at Livingston Methodist Church. So I'm going to have Courtney introduce herself, and then we're going to kind of flip the script. And Courtney is a new youth leader. Courtney, how long have you been doing this?
Since May 1st.
So very, very new youth leader.
Yes.
So she is not even 6 months into doing this. And so we thought it would be fun. A lot of times we bring, people who have many years of experience and such, but we thought it'd be fun to kind of have Courtney interview me, and ask some questions. We'll have some dialogue back and forth, but kind of have her lead kind of that part. So as you're listening to this, these would be questions that if you are starting off in youth ministry, maybe you have some of these same questions. Or if you are helping others as they start in youth ministry, these may be some things that the questions that are on their heart too. So first of all, Courtney, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are? You can go really high or really short, whatever, but kind of tell us about you and being part of ministry now.
Cool. Well, first, thank you so much for having me here. It's really a great opportunity for me to be able to ask some questions. But like you said, my name is Courtney Wheeland. I've been the youth director since May 1st, so a very short time. I was actually called to this position. I didn't go looking for it. I didn't apply. The pastor had a plate of food in his hands when we were in Connections after a Sunday service. He walked up to me and said, "What do you think about this?" And if that wasn't more God, then I don't know what would be. But I love it. It's going very well. The numbers are slowly growing, but it's more about the connections that we've been forming. They're going really great. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to asking some questions.
So, and what was your first kind of reaction whenever he came up to you and said, was it just like, "Yes, I'm ready, let's go," or was it?
I actually said, "You know what? It's surprising that my first response is not to find an excuse of why I can't. So that's a good thing. Let me go home, pray about it, think about it, and I'll get back with you." But yeah, I didn't go running. So
yeah, and that may be something to as people are asking people to help. We're going to talk about volunteers a little bit here, and so maybe some of that experience is something that can transfer. Yeah. So all right. So like I said, a little different. So you're asking the questions, and we'll see how long this goes, and if you can stump me, we'll see.
Cool. Okay. So first I've got, when you were starting out, what were the top 5 things that you would do in your first year of youth ministry?
So if I'm starting off in youth ministry, I go to a new church or been at a church like you have, kind of the things to focus. And I'm assuming this is kind of like, so you can look and go, "Hey, am I on the right track?" or
Yes.
whatever. and please jump in on any of these and stop and go tell me more about this or whatever. But
Okay.
we actually kind of did a workshop, and I kind of went through that in my last episode. Was the same workshop that you were at, that we did at your church, actually for youth ministry. And so there's a little of that in there and a little bit of different things within this. But I think the first thing, and we did talk about this, was to take account of what you have. Like, I mean, we kind of use the analogy, like you can't really know where you're going if you don't know where you are. And so whether that, and you're going to do this in anything you have, whether you are building a bookcase or building a youth ministry or whatever, like you need to figure out, okay, what do I have? What are the pieces that I have? What's good? What's not good? What needs to be replaced? What tools am I missing that I need to go buy? And I think the same thing when you start with the youth ministry, you kind of have to look at that. So, who are the kids? What are they? Do you have junior high? Do you have senior high? Do you have more of one or the other? That's going to be provide a big kind of help you give you a direction of where you're going. Are most of the kids who come there, are they churched or are they unchurched? Are they siblings or children or grandchildren of people who go to the church? Have they grown up in the church all their life? But there's also a lot of other youth ministries that when they get there, all the kids are from the neighborhood. They don't have a background. They don't have, because that's going to affect things like what they know. Because if they're from the church, what they've kind of been taught in Sunday school. They have a kind of at least a basic Bible background. If you say Moses, they're going to kind of know at least what you're talking about, or Noah and the ark. You may have an idea. But if you have those from the neighborhood who you do not know, that may change your curriculum. That may change your approach. That may change the time that you spent, attention spans. You can't really go off of that. So I know that we worked really hard with our children's person in my previous church, to make sure we had this continual deal. I knew what they learned. They were learning, they had kind of their core beliefs and things that they were learning, and I could build on that for the most part. But if you're going into a church for your first time, like that's not anything that it may not be the same case for you.
Right.
And so that, the people, your volunteers, like if you're going into a church, you need to find out from the volunteers who are there. It's a tendency a lot of times when you get a youth director, and I don't know if this happened with you, but a lot of times there's a volunteer base that is keeping that program going in the interim. So you have a youth director, they have volunteers, the youth director leaves. And so somebody says, hey, we'll keep it doing it. We'll keep it going for some case. And a lot of times what happens is when that new youth director comes in, they're like, all right, she's here or he's here, we're out.
Yeah.
And so that volunteer base that you had, that was maybe 5 or 6 parents were like holding on for dear life. Once you come, sometimes they're like, hey, what can we do? But a lot of times we're out of here. So kind of knowing that and knowing what your volunteers are going to be like. And do you need to lean into, finding volunteers for the first time, or how do you do that? So kind of taking account what you have, your facilities. Do you have a youth room? Do you have, you better say something.
Oh, I didn't know if you were asking me or you were just saying if you do. We actually have
that's what I would ask those. I mean, I would kind of find out, do you have a youth room? Do you have, what's the schedule of the church? What's the calendar of the church? What are the Sunday afternoon activities they always do? So we always do hanging of the greens, or I always do, the fifth Sunday dinner or whatever like that. So that calendar is important to have and know. Your school calendars are important to have and know. Do they match up? I mean, do y'all have basically one school, or is it y'all have several schools?
We have two typically that come here. One main school right here in Livingston, and we have one other school that the schedule is just a little bit different.
And so, I mean, like that's going to affect your, if you're having youth on a Sunday night when one school's out on Monday and one school's not, like, do you do your big program that night, or do you know that several are going to be gone? So take into account, like, what are some other things that you would think that you kind of, so like I said, you're going to interview me some, but I'm asking you questions too. So what are some other things that you would add to that list when you're talking about, because you have just started. So you may have some perspective that somebody else may not have, or that I don't have because I've been doing it for a while and I've forgotten.
I think that knowing where you're at financially, it's part of the resources that you're talking about, but specifically that takes a big part in knowing how you can kind of operate the following year, and maybe having some knowledge of how the finances were run in the previous year, so you kind of can gauge, how much did they spend on Wednesday nights typically? What did this type of party usually cost? Having that type of knowledge beforehand, it seemed like it could have been probably pretty beneficial.
Now we're dealing with, we have both Courtney and I are in the Methodist tradition and denomination. And so not everybody does this, but like one of the things we do is confirmation. And so, how much does it cost for confirmation per kid? Basically, we're talking retreats and supplies and things like that. Senior Sunday, we had 10 seniors this past year. It cost us this much. Looking on your sheet and your calendar, though, or your attendance stuff, you may see that you have 20 seniors the next year. That's something you need to take into account and try to consider.
That's a good point you make, to be able to look at your roster of students and really paying attention to what grade that they're going into, because I didn't think of that too. Hey, I need to be watching out for my seniors to see my juniors to see who's going to be seniors next year, to be able to plan for that. So that's some good advice. Yeah.
And it just helps you too when you're thinking, hey, we need to, if you come in with a group and you have 2 or 3 upperclassmen, then we're going to focus, we're going to pull them along, but we're going to focus most of our stuff younger, or how we plan, how we split groups up and things like that. So people, places, calendars, just a practical thing. And I think we have a podcast that talked about, we've had a couple that are kind of starting off in youth ministry, but it's good to get multiple of them. And one of the things that was brought up on one of those was just like how your processes work in your church. Like if you need money, if there's credit cards, how you get things on the calendar. Who are the people the committees to talk to if you're asking permission for who are the permission givers? And part of that is who are the listed permission givers? And then who are the unlisted permission givers?
Right.
Because there's always people who have ownership of something, and it's better to go at them and say, well, no, it says this. That's not going to work. So, example, we had our United Methodist Women group in my previous church. They had the tablecloths for the tables. And they were their tablecloths. They had bought them. It completely under their purview to have those. But there wasn't like you could just go in and get them, like if you wanted to use them. And so that was one of the things we knew. We knew who to ask. And we knew, we asked them the process. We said, hey, after we use these, it was for a senior dinner. After we use these, what do we do? And they said, wrap them up, put them in a bundle, and leave them here. And so nothing was written down anywhere. And we could have easily gone to the dollar store and gotten plastic tablecloths. But because we took time to ask permission, one, it helped us build a relationship. And it helped us to be able to use those. And the next time they were like, yeah, you can use them. Just let us know. And they would get them for us and do that. So who are the permission givers and who are the unofficial permission givers within that? So anything else you would think along with take account of what you have?
I would probably say identifying your people as your resource, the students who may be able to help you out as far as leadership goes, and really getting involved in the leadership committee if you don't already have one. Maybe making sure that you can formulate one and have that solid team to be able to help you out. That would be very beneficial.
Who are your volunteers and who are your youth? Because really, like if you can get the youth bought in, 1 or 2 or 3 key youth bought in, the others will follow on stage. So you got to kind of find those. And a lot of times that's the youth who, if they show up, everybody else shows up. And if they don't show up, the others don't.
Yeah, right. I know.
And one of the things that I did to look for youth leaders is I always look for the ones who were cleaning up afterwards without being asked, who set up chairs without being asked. like, hey, can I help do this? Yeah. Then who are quiet and didn't say anything about it. And you're like, all right, they're quiet, but if they're doing that, or they're saying, hey, I'll serve pizza tonight or whatever like that, it just kind of, put a mark in my brain as far as to watch them further.
Yeah.
As opposed to the ones who were just going to, just go
Right.
and leave immediately and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Of course.
so that was the, first thing was taking care of kind of what I have. And I guess the next is kind of part of that. But that's just when you're first starting out, is to have a bunch of conversations.
Right.
So talk with the youth. I mean, your first couple of lessons and things, and periodically throughout, should be, hey, tell me about your youth program. I'm new here, so tell me about it. Tell me what y'all do. What do y'all like to do? What do you not like to do? And of course, you're going to get some of the basic. You're laughing. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because just last night I learned that I have been mixing up the two classrooms for the boys' small groups and the girls' small groups. So just things like that, and just knowing where you're supposed to be at what times. They're like, no, you've been having us in the wrong class the whole time. Like,
You've been there since May.
Yeah, but nobody really said anything.
Well, but that's, finding out those things, finding out, with the youth, what do you, and then after you kind of figure out where you are, kind of, you take that account of what you have with them. It's like, well, where do you want to go? Like, what does this youth program look like? What are your goals? What does success look like for you? And I would do those sometimes I would do surveys. Sometimes I would do, we're especially talking about what we talk about on our series and things like that. I would say, hey, what would you like a series for us to talk about? What do your friends need for us to talk about? And a lot of times what your friends need for us to talk about is actually what they want to talk about. So whether that's relationships or that's stress or whatever that is having them be able to voice, hey, we really think that our friends would benefit from those type of things.
Yeah.
So, and then that's what games and what trips, what trips do they love? What trips did they, because the other thing too, is as you have a group that's been there for a while, what's a passion for one group may not be a passion for the younger ones. They just kind of held on to it because we'd always done it or it was easier. But, usually youth directors are coming in and there's probably a senior or a junior group that's kind of holding on to a few of those things, but that's an opportunity to set some new. So every time you smile at something, I'm going to ask you a question why. So, because you recognize,
we're going through that right now. It's been a thing, I guess, in the past that ski trips were very huge. Mm-hmm. And anytime that I've brought them up, because I've been kind of guided towards doing them again for some of the older crew that have been here, but the younger group is just not interested.
But that's why these conversations are, because that could lead you to be like, okay, we're going to do one last ski trip for the senior high, and junior high are doing this new thing. We're going to go. There's a thing in Branson called Winter Jam or Winter Fest or something. It's a 3 day. 3 days of concerts. It's over kind of the winter break kind of time. It's in Branson. You get in a hotel and you go to 3 days of concerts. And we took one day and went to Silver Dollar City. But when you're talking having those conversations, that's an opportunity for you to kind of ask, hey, what have you always wanted to do that we haven't had time to do? And when you're talking about summer, I mean, again, being in our denomination, we church camp, Army, but for whatever denomination you're in, you probably have those set summer things. We always go to this, we always go to this, and we always go to this. Do you always have to? And which of those things do they find value in, and which of those things have they just gone because they've gone, and someone else may say, you know what, I've thought about doing something different. So that gives you a chance as you have the conversation with youth, and then when you go to parents, you have the same conversations. Because you need to find out things like, are we too busy? Do we need to do Wednesday or Sunday? Or both? Or neither? Yeah. Now, two, a lot of times your first conversation you're going to have is just whatever they didn't like about the previous youth director.
I did have somebody tell me when we did our Q&A one of the students told me when asking what they liked about the old youth director or what they were more excited about me being there, they said, well, I'm going to get away with more with her than I did with him. I'm like, okay, thanks.
And sometimes they and they'll test you but they're finding they knew the boundaries they had before.
Yeah.
And so they'll test those with somebody else coming in.
Yes.
And try
but it's going well.
And figure those things out. And so, and the other conversations, I won't dwell too long on this because we're already 20 minutes in, is church leaders, having those conversations with church leaders, what's going well, where can, we had a United Methodist women dinner fundraiser, soup fundraiser. And we were like the youth to participate in that. And so that was one of the things we made a deal of. And all we did was come in and grab soup and go back to our room. But when they saw 60 kids walked in and get soup and stuff like that and go back, that made an impression. And that was something that they were, impressed. And then of course, and we have a couple of podcasts on this, but talk with your pastor and make sure you're on board with whatever if that's a senior pastor. And of course, in your case, because you have a associate who's kind of is, I guess Alan's kind of your initial, but still with the senior pastor too, because it's their vision for the whole church. And so does your stuff match up with their vision? What other conversations did you have, or did you find any of those either more helpful or less helpful, or what other conversations would you have?
The conversations with the senior pastor or the associate pastor?
Well, just any of those, youth parents, church leaders, pastor, like what other conversations?
Just really getting a lot of feedback. Every single Wednesday since school has started, the volunteers and I get together in a little huddle, and I just let them know I am all ears. You guys were here before me. I am whatever kind of changes you think we can make or should make, what you think went well, what you think needs to be different. Having those conversations has been extremely helpful because it lets me know I'm not alone. I'm not up there trying to run an entire program by myself, because I'm getting buy-in from the people that are helping me because I'm letting them help me. So having that kind of conversation and really learning a lot from who was here before me, which is the associate pastor, just making sure that he's somewhat in the loop of everything that's going on to kind of get the feedback from someone who's been more experienced. And also with the students, we haven't had any junior high on the leadership committee, but I've been having those conversations with possibly, bringing a couple of them in just because I want their feedback and opinions too. So those are just a few of them that we've been having.
What is that? So I don't know why I left volunteers off, but that should be definitely, one of the top on the list. The other one I had was other youth leaders in your area. That may be helpful because you kind of know what are, when's See You at the Pole, or when's, Fields of Faith, or are there things that most of the other youth groups do that, because if there's a big community youth thing on a Wednesday night, you may not have anybody in your group, it may be better to do that with them. So, and they're going to know the schools, they're going to know, especially, and this would be especially if you're first coming into a youth program. So anybody who's doing that, they're going to know the rules about visiting kids in schools. If you can do that, if you can't do that, they may know things like one of the things I had in Livingston, I had in several other places. I did. There was a little pass that the school district would give to youth leaders.
Oh, cool.
And it was general admission, so it wasn't like the reserve seats or anything like that. But all the volleyball, all the basketball, all the going to the football game, you could sit in the general admission part of the football game, which typically you go sit in general admission, and then there's some parent somewhere who doesn't have somebody with them that you can go sit with them. And so, cool. Yeah. And so that's one thing I did was, I found that one place I had to buy it, but it was like $10. It still saved a ton of money from going, but a lot of times those school people want you up there because you're influenced with those kids. And so they'll be like,
right.
And getting to know them. So if you can go and talk to the school people, administrators or principals or things like that, and volunteer anyway or be friends, and because that'll get you in a gate on the field for a football game afterwards, or that will get you some places that you may not normally be able to go. So so we talked about take account, have conversations. The thing that I wrote down that I don't think I mentioned in that workshop we did was I wrote down start reasonable and don't set unmanageable expectations. And I originally was thinking this youth-wise. And then as I wrote it, I started thinking, I wrote more for personal than youth. So where do you think I'm going when I mentioned that?
I would, in a broader sense, just don't set too high of expectations to be let down, and actually make your goals reasonable and attainable.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'm thinking like, okay, so we're going to have some youth leaders who are watching this, who are coming in, they're single. They can spend every waking hour with youth ministry. They can be at every game. I remember doing it. I mean, I was at the ball field every night. I didn't have a life except for what I was doing with that. And looking back, that probably wasn't wise. Especially if you're going to be somewhere for a period of time, and you may go from being single to dating someone, or going from having just you and your husband to having a family.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
I did not know my phone wasn't on silent.
That's all right.
Okay.
No problem. So like if you were going from being single to possibly relationships, or not having a family but wanting to have kids, like there's going to be things you have freedom and time and money and resources and things you'll have in one stage of life you won't have in the next. So, I mean, I guess if you're going to be someplace for 2 or 3 years, this may not be as big of a deal. But you don't want to set those expectations of you're going to be at every game, or even just coming in and you're eager. I'm going to be at every game that everybody plays. Well, the next year, whenever, or later that year, or something comes up and you get more busy at church, or you get more busy with family or something like that, and you can't do that, have you set those expectations? And I think there's definitely a push when you first start somewhere. You're going to do some extra things, but don't do so much that it's, don't show up at 8:00 in the morning in the office every day for 6 weeks and then decide you're going to change your schedule to be showing up at 10.
I'm laughing because that's something that I've actually personally done. I did set such a high expectation for myself to be here. Like the first few weeks, and this is without going to any of the kids' extracurriculars. This is summertime, not much going on. I was pulling 56, 60-hour weeks, but for what? There was really just because I thought I needed to be here, I'd get here early and I'd leave late and commit to all of these things that were really unnecessary because they had nothing to do with my ministry. And I just put myself in a position where I was burning out really quick, and I had just started. So you're right. Just don't put all of that weight on you from the very beginning, because things are going to change and you're not going to want to work that many hours in 1 week.
How did you, because this will be helpful for people. How did you kind of make that shift? Or are you still working 60 hours a week?
No, I've definitely, I've just put more boundaries on myself, more boundaries with my time, and made myself be a lot more effective with my time management, and also being very strict with myself, that I'm not going to allow myself to stay just because I think I have one more thing to do. Someone told me a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, that most of what I spend the most time doing won't matter anyways. So it was a little bit hard to hear, but it's true because of just who I am, just focusing on the smaller things and every single little detail, and I was just putting too much stress on those things. So I didn't really mean to say what I'm doing doesn't matter. It just, those tiny little things that I was consuming my time with, those weren't going to matter in the bigger picture. The message, the connection you have with the kids, that's what matters.
I'm trying to remember. It's some business kind of stat or some deal, but it's like the 80%. And somebody correct me, and somebody send in the reference whenever you hear this. But like the 80% is easy to do. Like the 80% of whatever program or whatever ministry, and you just got to figure out, is it, and 80% gets you a good, solid, whatever that is. So whether that's a trip or a youth program or creating a website or writing a song, like whatever task is kind of supposedly supposed to be a universal deal, that the 80% is kind of the easy to do. Like that's what you would typically do in a deal. So, but it's that last 20% that you kind of have to decide, is it worth, you will spend more energy on that last 20% than you will on the 80%.
Right.
And I would argue that some of those things are worth it. Sometimes it is worth it. It is worth putting that extra effort in. But sometimes you got to look at it and go, it's not, that's with whatever that is, with whatever program or youth night or message or worship service or whatever like that, is that last little bit. And that may be like, I will sit and spend 3 hours making a new intro video for our worship service. Mm-hmm. And literally it's 30 pictures with music in the background, but I will go through, I have this picture and I have too many of these, or, or I'll be at a mission trip and doing a video for the end of the week. Like, do I have every single small group and every single person? And is this person in there too many times? And is this the right song? And really in the end, like, it's 10 minutes, they sit and watch a video and they go on and nobody ever sees it, but I've done all of that. And so I think sometimes those are important, but I think you can get down in the weeds and caught up with those type of things. For me, it's like creative things a lot of times is what I do it. But is that kind of what we're thinking of?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Just exactly to the T, pretty much. Just zoning in on too many of those tiny things that really, like you said, someone will watch the video one time and never even be able to tell the difference of whether you put that one person in there too close or something like that. But I'll be like, we sent out giving statements earlier today, and I put the logo in, and there's a faint line around the logo that's not supposed to be there. Oh no!
And I'm like, I want to redo them, and my finance administrator's like, no, it's fine, it'll be okay. So, but that's that extra 20%. But if given the time, I would spend, and I would sit there and I would use Canva or Photoshop and put it around. So I think the reasonable thing is with yourself, but I also think it's with your program. And one of your questions was, how do you form relationships with upperclassmen, especially like guys with girls, or you can move with a girl guy. And so I think one of the things I was thinking of is to focus, and like you said, the other thing you said sounded a little cruel, a little harsh, but this will too. Focus on those who will be there the longest.
True.
So if I'm coming into a program and I have 3 seniors and 14 junior high, I'm gonna focus on the 14 junior high. Now, I'm not going to exclude the seniors. I'm not going to say, good riddance or anything like that. But when I'm making my plans, when I'm making my financial choices, when I'm making my program choices, if I have a choice to cater to one or the other, it's going to be to those who are going to be in that program for the longer time. Because again, depending on how long you're going to be there. So if you are there for a year, then focus on everybody. But if you're trying to build something that's going to last, then you've got to kind of focus in on those younger ones. And this was something that Doug Fields, who wrote the Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry and first 2 years in youth ministry, told me at a workshop. And I said, hey, I've got these seniors and I've got this group. And he goes, focus on the junior high. Now, don't neglect, do your senior Sunday. If you can do a Bible study for them, but the thing I would tell you is maybe that's not your relationships to form.
Yeah.
Maybe there's someone else. Maybe there's you're talking upperclassmen of the opposite sex. So you're talking senior guys, junior and senior guys, I guess. Maybe there's a teacher that goes to your church that would do a guy's Bible study with them. Maybe there's an older leader in the church, a guy who would meet with them, and they do a fun, we had a group when I was in Athens, and I had the same thing. I had a group of juniors and seniors who really didn't come. They eventually wanted to form their own group.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I was thinking, I was like, I could fight that and I could make sure they're with us, or I could empower the parents who wanted to help form that own group. And so that's what we did. They met on Sunday nights, the same time we met with youth. The juniors and seniors went over there. That group started off juniors and seniors. The next year it was seniors, and the next year it was gone. I prayed for them. I went to their games. I saw them at games. But I was really not their primary person. I focused on the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th graders who we had, and that's where we built the program from. So, and you may not be at a church that allows you to do that. There may be people who are like, no, you need to do this. But if you have the chance, that would be my recommendation. Is to focus on and find somebody who can connect with them and go to their games and show that you support them and you haven't forgotten them. But there's probably someone already there who has a more relationship. And that may be one of those volunteers who kind of came in and is like, peace out when you come in. It's like, hey, could you, I don't need you on Wednesday nights, but could you do something with these guys?
Yeah.
Once a month or once a week, or go play paintball or do whatever type thing. Does that make sense?
That's kind of why, yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's kind of why I wanted to try to start bringing on some of the junior high onto the leadership team, just because the upperclassmen we had before the summer started, we had all of these meetings planning out our summer and planning all these events. But when the youth group is represented by the upperclassmen and they're not even showing up to any of the events or participating in anything, then we have all these events that the junior high weren't even really interested in to begin with. So I think I'm not sure if the maturity level's there yet with them, but I think maybe I'm looking forward to trying to develop it, because what they want is what matters. So
well, and they can, maturity level may not be there, but they're still they know what it is that they're kind of needing.
But yeah.
And doing, I think we talked about before, if you have up to like 10 or 8 or whatever like that, like split as soon as you can. And I think that's good advice. And doing something separate for, junior or senior high, or I don't know, when you do your fun events or whatever like that. And I know you do your youth program right after school on Wednesday.
Yes.
But like if it's a Sunday thing, and maybe that's, hey, this week senior high are going with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, and they're going to someone's house and watching a movie, and junior high are staying here and do games. And then the second week, we're all doing something together. And the third week, this junior high are going off to do something. We would go down to, I keep saying I was youth director at Livingston, where Courtney is a billion years ago. So everything has changed. She has way more resources and way more building than we had. We had that little room with the pit in it. That was our youth room. But so we would go like to Humble or to somewhere and go rock climbing and go eat, but that was the junior high deal. And so you kind of built those time with those groups as you go. So, doing those separate things. The other thing I had on the program, reasonable, is start small and stay small until you can't any longer. You said y'all do small groups, y'all divide in small groups and do that on Wednesday night.
Yes, and last night was extremely powerful. I think there was out of like the 10 girls that we had, there were probably 4 that weren't sobbing by the end of it. I was so blown away that they just was the first time that they ever really just broke down and were so comfortable to be able to let it all out. So it was pretty cool. And I think that, they never would have done that if we wouldn't have broken off into small groups.
So you have junior high girls, senior high, or do you have girls and guys, or?
Because of the volunteer, my volunteer base, we only do just females and males. We don't really have the ability yet to split into junior high and senior, or junior high and senior high.
Yeah. So with those small groups though, I know a lot of people who are like, hey, let's do a huge big event. How many are in your small groups right now?
Probably 10 and 10 or 10 and 8.
That's a good number. So you wouldn't want to do a program though that attracted 100 kids on a Sunday night. and said, hey, y'all come, because you don't have the volunteers or the small groups or the space set aside or whatever. And so I think that's one of the things I was talking about was as you're, building small, that 10, that 20 becomes 25, that 25 becomes 30, but you have to be able to know kind of where we're going and be ahead because you need to look and go, okay, well, we have 20 now. Now, I will tell you that groups grow exponentially. So it's a lot longer to get from 5 to 10 than it is to get from 10 to 20 and from 20 to 40. Like, just because you have more people who are inviting. So, I mean, that would be an encouragement is, already be looking at who are your future small group leaders. And that was something you wrote is how to recruit volunteers. And one of the ways that I've seen to do that is to have the volunteers recruit the volunteers. Have them, hey, and this was, a lot of my references go back to Doug Fields and the Purpose Driven Youth Ministry, but it's just a very good basic book with that. And one of the things that they did is they had they had teams of people. So they had a prayer team, and that was the minimal commitment. I mean, prayer's not minimal, but that was anybody can do that. Anybody, and I actually had somebody at the church, Miss Dabney, ran this for me. And so we got several people we had all the people of the church. And at that time you couldn't do email. It was send out a letter. And so we would send out a monthly letter with the prayer concerns for the youth group and then specific names. So we divide all the kids up into specific groups and we give people the same names. Anything we knew that if they had shared a prayer concern, we would share that on there and we'd mail those out. So once a month, people got a letter with the prayer concerns for the youth group and then the specific people that they were praying for. And we tried to keep them throughout as long as possible. So you had the prayer team, and then you kind of had the resource team. And this was those who, I have a boat, I have a house, I can provide food, I can drive. They're not going to be your small group leaders, but they will do in a pinch, or they will do anything you ask them to. I had one parent in my previous church that she said, I'll give you 1 weekend a year. Overnight retreat. She goes, I'll give you one. Use it wisely, but I'll give you one. And so I would look at, hey, I've got enough adults for this, but I don't have for this. Could you do this? And so she would, all right, that's my one. And that was either a 4-day mission trip or a 3-day retreat or something like that. And she would do that. And so you had a prayer team, I had my resource team. And then I had my kind of Wednesday night volunteers. And these were the ones that they're not going to lead a small group, but they'll come up and monitor bathrooms, monitor hallways, sit in a group with a small group leader, but not, I don't want to lead, but I'll sit in there. And then I had my small group leaders. And then I had a core from that. And so kind of went in with that. But what they talked about doing was do a dinner for all of them and invite everybody. Hey, you support the youth group. We're in your, and you could do this at the end of the summer when bring your pictures back from your mission trips and things like that. But we do a dinner and seat your small group leaders at different tables. And then your prayer team come around there and just have them sit wherever. And part of the conversation you coach your small group leaders to say this is, hey, what do you do? How do you what's your part? Oh, well, I'm on the prayer team. Oh, that's great. We thank you for your prayers. Have you ever thought of being a small group leader? Well, I never could do that. Well, I thought that too. But I got in and these are some of the kids in my small group and they're sitting there too. And they provide us all the stuff. And I started off as an assistant in the small group leader, which means I just was in the room. I was a positive influence in the lives of the youth. But then I've worked into that. It's like, would you be interested ever in just coming to assist me one night? And so you're creating those conversations of somebody who's been there. You're supposed to ask them. You're the youth leader. You're going to ask. They go the other way when they see you walking down the hall. But it's somebody who's a friend of mine who I'm in a Sunday school class with, or it's somebody who is in the, our kids play soccer together or whatever like that. And so it kind of created those opportunities. So I want my small group leaders to find their other, move people up from prayer to resource to that. And the other thing was ask the kids, hey, who, or just observe and also who would be a great small group leader? Would you ask them? It's a whole lot harder to say, no to the 3 junior high girls who come up to you and say, Miss Courtney, we wondered if you would, and create an easy thing, a one night thing or a small series or hey, just one night, would you come and do this? And then, or help with this event or whatever. And then they could go into that. So that'd be a way to recruit volunteers. But because you're going to need that as you continue to grow. And the third thing on the program is I wrote down build roots, not fruit. And there's a story that I read somewhere about, when I read it happened to me. I got some plants. I was going to plant them in my flower bed, and there were daisies or pansies or something. I don't know what they were. But anyway, and it said plant them and then pull off all the flowers. I was like, well, that's counterproductive. I'm pulling off all the flowers. But the point is if they're not focused on producing flowers, they focus on producing roots.
Yeah.
And you have a stronger flowers later. And so whatever you can do to build roots with your small group leaders, your schedule, your program, your church, the more you can build root. And this is long-term, thinking long-term versus short. Short-term, plant the flowers in, you're going to rip them up later. But if you're looking at building something 5, 6, 10 years, plant those roots because that fruit's going to build. And part of that was the fourth thing. You said 5, so I have 4, and we can come up with the 5th one. But that was, and I just wrote culture. Like, what's the culture of a youth group? What do you want your culture of your youth group to be? And that's we talk about culture, and that's kind of a word, but a buzzword. But it's like, what's the attitude? What's the feeling? What are the unwritten rules in your youth group? I never made a rule that you couldn't have cell phones in small group. I never wrote it down as far as a deal. I let my small group leaders, which were adults and youth, I had youth and adults paired up leading small groups. And it was amazing that about 4 weeks in, I started walking to small groups and all the phones were in a basket on the side. Yeah. So I didn't have to come up with that. It wasn't something top down. It became part of the culture. And as those students, so I'm thinking particularly of one of my girl small groups, as they grew up in that small group and then they became small group leaders, they carried those things with them. They knew the things that you just automatically did. They knew how you acted when we went in a van and we went somewhere. They knew when to turn things in, and we're not a youth group that we do last minute turning in of stuff and stuff. They had built that, but it wasn't me who was setting those rules hard and fast down. It was built up from the youth, and that's where you build that culture with those sophomores and down, and their parents, and build that, build those things as part of that culture and building that culture up. So, well, that's 4 things. What would be number 5? What are the things that you would say, that you would put in your first year of youth ministry? What did you do that I haven't mentioned, or what did you do that you regret doing, or you take the last one.
Okay. What did I do that I regret doing? I didn't go into the group and set the bars that I told myself in my committee that I was going to set. As far as some of the guidelines that we wanted to put in place, I really had this idea that I was going to go in gung-ho. Like, we've had a little bit of PDA issues in the past, and just certain things like that. And I told myself and my committee, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be strong about this. This is what's going to happen. And I did not do that. And I don't know if it was just weakness or maybe being put on the spot and then realizing it wasn't easy as I thought it was going to be, but sticking to those guns is something, or not doing so actually, is probably something that I regret. Yeah. And I think that it's still new. The school year is still new for me to be able to start. So I actually told myself last week that I was going to, and I started initiating some of those ground rules that I told myself in the committee that I was going to. So we're slowly getting there, but.
And where was the need for those ground rules come from? Was that the parents who said, hey, we need to do this as you first came in, or something that you had noticed, or something the kids had said, or?
It was something I noticed, and also the rest of the church noticed. I mean, if the pastor is having to go up to the youth and tell them that you don't need to be spooning in the middle of the foyer, there's a problem there. So,
and this is probably a whole other podcast, but yeah.
So just knowing that I didn't go in and nip that right in the bud from the beginning. Like I told myself I was going to, that it's completely on me. And so I'm starting to be able to be more comfortable in doing that. I think initially because I was so worried about them liking me, and maybe that's like one of the downfalls of many new youth pastors, or not, I'm not sure, youth directors, but I failed at that, and so now I'm trying to correct it.
No, and I think that's a big thing that youth leaders face. You're going in, you want to be liked. I mean, I talked about this earlier with somebody else. Like, you want to be liked, you want to, be the fun, cool, aunt or friend or whatever. But somebody told me once, it's like, you can be their best friend, they can't be yours.
Yeah, that's true.
So there will be things that, yes, you're going to have a blast and have fun, but it is a lopsided relationship. And the responsibility lies on the youth person as far as and that's, that brings me to, you talk about boundaries and stuff like that. That's like communication boundaries. And that's, yes, you can be called for an emergency at any time in the middle of the night. No, don't call me at 11 o'clock asking me what time we're meeting for the deal. Or, like just kind of setting some of those things, communication, whether that's Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or text messages or whatever those type of things are. And all different groups do all different things. So I'm not going to get into what to use and what not, but I think you can set those, setting those boundaries within that you're not available 24/7, 7 days a week for normal things. Obviously, someone dies, someone is in a wreck, faith crisis, something like that, you're available. But the other, not everything is an emergency, and not everything requires you to be able to be there.
Right. Yeah.
So, well, what other questions did you have that we really kind of haven't? I think we've kind of hit almost all the 7 that you talked about.
I think so. I think that we've hit them all pretty well. They were all kind of intertwined with each other. That's perfect.
One of the things fundraising is something you did mention.
Fundraising, yes. Best practices for fundraising.
And these are going to be totally opinion based because everybody does different things. I do not like any of the wrapping paper, bundt cakes, sausage and ice cream, cookie dough. I don't like any of those that are like, I'm selling something, and if I buy it and I spend $100, the youth group gets 30. Like, any of those. And really, as a pastor now, I'm looking at going, the youth ministry should be funded through the budget of the church. But I know that's not always possible. We do some fundraising for things. Some people want the youth to earn their money for the trip. I use air quotes in there because I think that is a ministry of the church. I think that is a mission of the church. And the money we pay now to send some kid to camp or to UM Army is going to pay dividends down the road. But I understand too that not everybody sees it that way. But I would stick, and I've always stuck with anything, or just a couple of principles. Things that you don't have to sell and get really bad return on. Anything that you can just kind of help people make donations. So the envelope fundraiser is one that I've seen that we've done, that you number envelopes 1 to 100, and you pick, hey, I'm taking number 23. I put $23 in there, which somebody usually ends up putting 50 in there, but 23. And like when you do all of them, it's like $5,000 or something. Don't quote me on that. I do not have the specific deal, but it's on there. If you figure it out, you can look it up. Maybe I'll correct that and send that in for the show notes. The other thing, dinners or things after church. When we were there, we used to do the pancake, fourth Sunday pancake breakfast every fourth Sunday. We'd be in the kitchen cooking pancakes, and I can't remember the guy's name. It was Sally and Leonard, I think. Ask about the pancake, and they griddle, and we did pancakes. It was a pancake breakfast every every month or so. So things like that, but also things that are going to not pull just from the church. So what are some community-based fundraisers you can do? Whether that is, we've done like the Flamingo People's Yards and stuff like that. That was kind of fun. It's the only fundraiser I ever thought I might get shot or arrested doing. Because you're going in the middle of the night and putting flamingos in someone's yard. Our youth group here did egg your yard. And so you got eggs with candy in it, but just all through the Easter kind of period. But some smart people hired them to come do it on Saturday night before Easter. And so the eggs were hidden and they didn't have to do any of it. So, things like that, but just kind of whatever your fundraiser, there's thousands of fundraising ideas, but consider if you're pulling money from the church or if you're pulling money from the community. You don't want too many pulling from the church. Consider the amount of work going in for the fundraiser. We talked about overcomplicating things. And for instance, we do a pumpkin patch here. I did a pumpkin patch at my previous church. It's not a fundraiser. It's a outreach event. But a lot of people do, look at it as a fundraiser because we'd raise about $3,000 on it.
Nice.
And, but that's $3,000 for 30 days worth of 10 hours of shifts per day. And I had parents who came up and said, I will give you $100 if you don't schedule me for pumpkin patch. And so in my mind, I was thinking, all I need to do is get 30 parents to say that, and we don't have to do a pumpkin patch because if it's about the fundraiser, if it's about the money. So what are the things, can a 3-hour car wash raise as much as a month-long pledge drive or whatever, like some of those type of things. Something else we had people do was the stock sales. And that is basically a piece of paper that says I'm buying stock in the youth group and I'm paying $100. And then at the end of the summer, kind of maybe that same dinner, all together, do like a stockholders dinner. Make them dinner, show your pictures, the return. Some people do even levels. Like if you give $100 or more, then we'll send you a picture and a card from the event that we're on. If you give so much, those type of things, or maybe if it's, $500, you do a video updates for that trip and they however it complicated. Again, don't make it too complicated, but a stockholders dinner, because people are just giving money then. It's just a donation. You don't have to worry about people getting anything back. So you don't have to worry about like tax stuff. It can be a straight donation. You're not selling anything. So any of those type of things where I would encourage anything that's straight donations or mostly straight donations, or is considering taking from the church and from the community.
Okay.
So, so you are starting off, like I said, you're this far into it. What advice do you have for someone who is starting off in youth ministry? Like what are the top 3 things you would tell them?
The top 3: know your people and utilize them as resources. The volunteers and the students and your staff. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Number 2. And number 3, try to stick to doing what you say you're going to do from the beginning, so you're not having to backtrack and fix it at the end.
And when you set your goals, be willing to adjust those and do that. But and I would say part of that is you definitely want to leave room for God to do things. You definitely want to room for the Holy Spirit to move. You definitely don't want to do, hey, we're going to set our goals so low that we can, we're going to have 10 people in youth when you already know you have 20. Like that's not wise. So you want to set God-sized goals, but also too, you want to make sure you are setting goals that you are discerning those through prayer, through conversations, through scripture, so that it's the goal that God is setting, not the goal that you're setting. Right. Because you can say, I want to do this. And God's like, no, you're not. Yeah. Or you say, I want to have 20. And he goes, well, why not 40? Why are you, why not this? And so, I think that's important to set those goals and stuff. So, well, Courtney, it was good to talk to you and I know I did a lot of talking and answering questions, and I hope that you have found things, that you can take with you. And if you're listening to this, I hope that you have found things that you can take with you, especially if you were starting off in youth ministry. But the reality is any of the stuff that we talked about is not necessarily like you still should, even if you're 20 years in, have conversations with people. You set your boundaries and your expectations. Have those conversations, take account of what you have, because what you have now may be different than what you had 3 years ago or even last year. Or look at, coming out of pandemic, your youth ministry and ministry in itself is completely different coming out of the pandemic. And there are things that you used to do that you'll never do again. You said the wildest situation, and I don't know about the wildest, but I remember one, this was pre-pandemic and probably still not wise. I told my we had a group of senior high youth who met on Thursday nights, and we met at the church, and I said, hey, if we have 20 or more, we'll go to Sonic. And at Sonic at that time, they had like 31 flavors of shakes. And it was everything from chocolate and cookie dough to bacon and jalapeno, and like they had all sorts of flavors. And so we said, if we have more than 20 at Senior High Bible Study, we'll go and we'll order every shake. And so one of my high school students, very responsible, and ended up being one of my best youth interns, left ahead of us with the credit card and went and ordered and said, I want a small shake, 31 shakes. And the lady didn't believe her at first, and we did. So we got 31 shakes. We all showed up, and we all ate 31 shakes.
That's awesome.
Am I going to do that post-COVID? No, that's not the wise thing for everybody to be sharing shakes. Was it wise to do when we did it? No, not at all. I'll remember it forever, and that'll be a story I tell. And I guess that's if y'all go back and listen to Adrian Lucio's podcast, because he tells the story of going to the church and going to his church. And he just started off, and he takes his youth group to the corn maze in town, but he didn't do the research to find out that that night was like the haunted corn maze, and it was like people with chainsaws and blood and guts and all this. And so he shares. I'll let him share the rest of that story if you go listen to it. But that's something else to remember when you're starting off with this. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things that you wouldn't have done before. You want to build trust, but you also need to have grace for your volunteers, for your parents, for your youth, and mostly for yourself. Because you're going to do things that are going to mess up, and it's not the end of the world. And the other thing I would suggest that it's not on my list is find people that you can talk with who are in the same ministry context. So Zoom, in person, whatever, but meet with other youth leaders and share your thoughts and comments, because things like this, like there's things you shared here that I'm writing down. Like I want to make sure and share next time whenever somebody asks me these questions. Share those thoughts and content and things with other people, because and your struggles, and find somebody who's not in your church or your denomination, so you can complain about your immediate pastor or your parents or that one kid, and nobody knows them. So it's important to have those places that you can vent and share and do this type of thing. So, but any last words?
No, I think that you've answered some really great questions. You did really well at that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And one of the things is, Courtney, if somebody else is starting off and wanting, because you've been doing this for 4 or 5 months, but there may be somebody who's starting off and is doing it for 1, and they want to get the perspective of someone who's just starting, or you shared something and they're like, hey, I want to know more about that. How can we get a hold of you? Social media or email or whatever? Facebook /course students course student 7100, or you can email me, Courtney at livingstonfmc.org. Also Instagram, just course student 7100. You can find us on either of those. And feel free to reach out to me anytime. Yep. So connect with Courtney. And hopefully in a year or so, we'll come back and do the what did I learn in my first year of youth ministry.
Yeah, right.
And I'll ask you the questions, and you can say, hey, we did this. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here, for listening, for spending this hour with us. Again, just a reminder, social media, at Talk Student Men. make sure and check that out. Follow us. And if you like something you heard, if you like a podcast episode, especially this one, then tell someone else. Say, hey, go listen to this. Go listen to Courtney on at Talk Student Men. Website, studentministryconversations.org. Be sure and check that out. Also, if you have something you're passionate about in youth ministry, if you have something you have learned, you want to share something that really is on your heart in youth ministry, and you'd like to share it in this format, Courtney, tell them it's not scary.
It's not scary.
Okay. So then contact us. You can do it through social media. You can email us. There's contact information on our website. There's a little form you can fill out if you wish. And let us know. And we'd love to schedule you to talk about youth ministry, because our goal is to capture those conversations of youth leaders. Because what Courtney and I've talked about today, someone else is asking those questions. And so we want to hear what you have to share too. So if you would like to be on the podcast, let us know and we will get you scheduled. Other than that, I hope you'll have a great week, and I hope to see y'all again soon. Bye.
Thank you, Russell. Bye.
Thanks.